So I wanted to start this video by asking you, the viewer, how many friends you have, how many close friends you have. Do you have friends that you trust? Do you have any friends you've known for a long time? Do you have a large group of friends? It can be a rhetorical question, or feel free to answer in the comments if you like. But yeah, there's a lot of statistics coming out now about how a lot of people don't really have any friends anymore. And a lot of these videos pop up. I don't know if any of you have ever had these videos in your algorithm of, I'm 30 and I have no friends, or I'm, 25, I have no social life, etc., etc. And all the comments will be full of people saying, I'm in the same situation, I don't have any friends. And there's a good amount of statistics coming out, like this was of Americans, but it's now a bit outdated. I would imagine this is quite a lot worse now, post-COVID, but this was pre-COVID. The share of Americans who have zero close friends has gone from 3% of the population in 1991, so a very small percentage of the population had no friends, to 12% in 2021. So it's gone up 4 times. When you're dealing with smaller percentages like 3 and 12, it can sound like an insignificant difference, but a 4 times increase, and that's, well, I guess that's not pre-COVID, is it? Actually, 2021 is not really pre-COVID, but the share who have 10 or more close friends fell from 33% to 13%. So yeah, generally people have a lot less friends than they used to. We're a lot less, well, maybe we're a lot less social. It depends on how you look at it. And in some ways we're a lot more social, actually, I think, round the clock, in a way that we weren't before. But I don't think that this problem necessarily began just with technology. I think other things have kind of accelerated this, and I think we're seeing the consequences of it now. We're seeing the kind of we're seeing the end result of things. I think a lot of these things began like 10, 20, 30 years ago. But for me, it's always been an interesting topic. Friendship. I think it's kind of an oddly taboo topic in a way that relationships kind of aren't. I feel there's almost more shame and embarrassment around friendship than there is around relationships. Like, for example, when you were at school, if you think back to being at school, I think when I was at school, at least, most people weren't in relationships. It wasn't that normal to be in a relationship. There were kids who were in relationships and had girlfriends and stuff, and you did feel bad if you weren't one of those people. You felt bad about yourself, you felt insecure, but you weren't in a minority. It depends on the school you went to and where you grew up and everything and how old you were at the time, but generally speaking, at school, like, I didn't feel I was in a minority of people who weren't in relationships. But if you didn't have any friends at school, you were in a small minority of people, I think, who didn't have any friends, and it was a constant. That was a thing you really needed. You didn't need to be in a relationship at school, but you needed friends, and if you didn't have them, generally speaking, unless you were super confident and independent, it was a big problem. It was a huge problem in your life to not have friends. And I think at that age, a kind of desperation begins, not just to have friends, but to appear to have friends, because to appear to not have friends is to be bad, it's to be lesser, it's to be a loser. And it was something you never wanted people to think about you. You didn't want to be seen on your own, you didn't want to sit by yourself, you didn't want to I remember, for example, I moved to a new school in year 9, which I guess, I don't know what that would be in American or more global terms, but when I was like 13 maybe, I don't know, moved to a new school in a different town and didn't know anyone, and I was immediately assigned with like the other new kid, and I didn't particularly like him, and I didn't want to be his friend, and he knew some other people at the school, or he had become friends with a couple of other kids, and I didn't want to hang out with them, and I didn't have anyone else to hang out with, so I used to just go and hide in the toilets for all of my lunch break because I thought, long term, I don't want to be friends with these people. I didn't like them, and I just found them uncomfortable to be around. So I thought, rather than walk around by myself accepting my reality, accepting my fate, I just thought I'll just hide in the toilets and just not let anyone see that I don't have any friends. Because I would have preferred to have lost out on the opportunity of maybe making some friends than to have anyone see me on my own, you know. Because if I was walking around on my own, someone might have said, you know, why don't you come and hang out with us? And most kids are not that nice, but some are. And but I didn't want to take the risk of someone saying, oh my God, look at this loser, he's on his own, he doesn't have any friends. So I think most people grow up feeling embarrassed, and I think now that is changing. People are like these videos, for example. I think 15 years ago, putting a video on YouTube saying I have no friends, it would have felt a lot more embarrassing, and you would have been more worried about people seeing it, and you would have, I don't know, it just seemed a lot weirder back then. Oh God, the chair's sinking again. It doesn't even sink enough to be funny, you know. It just sinks enough to be annoying. It'd be nice if it was more comedic. My old chair used to do that. A sort of comedic, you know, sort of 20 centimetre sink lowering. Anyway, Jesus. What was I saying? Christ. Yeah, I think now it's more normal. Now it's more normal to admit to not having friends, and there's memes about it, and people joke about it, and it's more a part of our culture. It's just more normal. In the same way, I guess a lot of these things, like for example, in the past, not having kids or a family or a husband or wife would have been seen as very shameful or embarrassing, and now it's not, and people are quite open about it. It's just normal, you know. It's not a thing that you have to worry about. Or it might be a thing you have to worry about, but you don't have to worry about people excessively judging you for it. You don't have to feel like a freak, because it's much more common, whereas there was a time when to be unmarried at a certain age was almost freakish, you know. So I think now it's becoming normalized, which in some ways is a good thing, because you feel ironically less alone, but in other ways is a bad thing, because we're accepting it as normal. So yeah, why? There are obvious reasons. I guess one would be the internet. That's one of the more recent reasons. I do think this trend began before the internet was widely popular, but the internet, obviously, you can kind of get that fix. It's a bit like porn, right? Like, you know, it gives you the illusion of having sex, so people are maybe not as keen, or as I think they are in reality, but people maybe don't have the same drive to go out and meet women or men, and it's like a methadone, you know. It's a form of methadone. It's like it kind of fills that. It doesn't fill that hole, but it covers over it, you know. So you can get into fights about politics online. You can comment on YouTube videos. You can do whatever, you know. You can talk to people, you can be in groups, and you can kind of feel like you're socializing, and in a way you are. I mean, like in some ways it's really good, you know. I talk to people on here and I really like it, and it often feels very meaningful and like a real human interaction, but it's not quite a real human interaction, because it's taking place via screens and text, and you're not looking people in the eye, and there's no, you know, when I say physical component to it, I don't mean sexual or anything. I mean just you're not face to face, you know, face to face component. So that would be an obvious one. I think there's just a general trend towards being more individualistic and creating a life, you know, for yourself, kind of, and choosing things as we become less traditional. It's kind of like, what do I want, not what does society expect from me. And again, I think there's good and bad aspects of that. I mean, as an individual, it's good, ostensibly at least. I can choose what I want to do. I don't have to worry about what my community think of my life choices. And that seemed like such a terrible thing in the past, that kind of judgment, you know. For example, like, oh, so-and-so's had, you know, lots of partners, or so and so's not married, or those people are all dating amongst each other and they're not settling down, and or whatever it is. That seemed like such a bad thing, and in some ways it was. But when you look now, as a society is kind of like a free-for-all of everyone doing what they want. It's not really working at all. There are some crazy statistics about relationships as well, which is a kind of a separate video, but the number of people who are single, particularly the number of men who are single, which is kind of funny because you'd think the numbers would and should be more or less even, but they're not even close. I think it's like twice the amount of men almost are single. Sorry if you can hear the incredibly annoying yappy dog outside. He is fucking irritating. There's two, actually. I don't understand the appeal of yappy dogs. There is no appeal to yappy dogs. I don't understand why people punish themselves with yappy dogs. It's incredibly annoying. I have to listen to that dog all day. Anyway, yeah, so things that seem good, like, oh, you're free to do whatever you want, you're free to have as many partners as you want, people can just do what they feel, and if it doesn't feel right, they can just leave, and all of these things that seem good, they're not, at the very least, I think it's fair to say they're not all good. They're not entirely good, these things. They have good and bad consequences. Personally, I believe they're probably more bad than good, but I do understand, the old way of doing things, where you had a terrible marriage and you had to just stick it out, was awful as well. I think there's a healthy medium. But yeah, that doesn't really relate to friendship. But yeah, it does, in the sense that, we're progressing more and more into kind of like very individualistic lifestyles, and it offers lots of benefits, but yeah, we have to be careful, I think. So there's that. So you can kind of, there's also the fact that people move a lot more. I live in a different country, and in this country I've lived in numerous different towns and cities, so you don't really make your roots anywhere. So the only long-term friendships I have are on WhatsApp, and there's that. And then, I mean, for me personally, yeah, I mean, whilst I'm on that, I'm a bit slow today, by the way. Sorry, I haven't had caffeine prior to doing this video because it's quite late, so you have to bear with me a little bit. I'm still getting to the point, just maybe not as quickly and sharply as I might like. Yeah, so for me, it's always been a weird thing, friends and making friends has always been a difficult thing. I've generally always had friends to some degree, when I was in primary school, when I was in secondary school, when I was a bit older. I was never, the bottom rung of the social ladder. There were very brief periods where I didn't have any friends. I would sometimes chop and change social groups when it wouldn't really work out very well with one social group. Sometimes there were kind of like mutinies against me. That seemed to be a recurring kind of cycle that would take place from primary school onwards. I'd become a kind of de facto leader of a social group, and then they would kind of, they would kind of turn on me, and which probably says more about me than anyone else. But yeah, it was always a difficult thing for me, and always a thing I was like insecure about, and always a thing I think like for a lot of people that was just generally difficult. And required a lot of effort and stress and thought and embarrassment and shame or anger or feelings of rejection or whatever, not an easy thing. And yeah, I guess there have been periods even as an adult where I've very much had no friends really, apart from people I only speak to on WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever. And now in real life, I guess I know like a couple of people in real life, not people I've known for long, not people I know super well, people I like, but it's not really what friendship used to be. Friendship, I think, generally used to be kind of people you met at school, maybe at university at the latest, and you knew them for your whole life. And so they were not family, but pretty close to family, whereas now I think it's a lot more common that, your friend is someone who, has the same hobby as you. You both do like rock climbing or something, and you've both lived in the same city for the past like 2 or 3 years. It's not necessarily the same. For many people it is, but for a lot of people, it's not a kind of long-term thing with someone who you really know well, who you've watched grow, because you can be around someone for a long time and not really know them, but when you see someone go through different phases of their life, you see someone go from being a kid to being an adult, you do know them, really. Like, you might not know everything about them, but when you see the direction someone is going in, that tells you a lot more than where they are now. When you see the progression of someone's lifetime, so it's hard to fully know someone who you have a kind of stationary relationship with. So yeah, that's my situation, which I think is fairly normal. I think it's quite common. Like, my girlfriend, for example, at various different jobs, she's had friends at those jobs, and they're usually relatively close friendships, and then she leaves the job, and then she just doesn't really speak to those people anymore, and makes new friends at new jobs. And most of the time that's how it goes. They're kind of transient friendships, and I think a lot of friendships now are very transient, and I don't think those are that useful. I don't think those are that valuable. They're good. It's a good thing to have, but it's hard to trust someone you've only known for a short period of time, and often you make the mistake of doing so, for example. Like, and you tell these people things, or you trust them with certain things, and then they let you down, or you just think, oh, it's kind of crazy that I thought I knew this person so well who I didn't really know at all. Maybe I trusted them too much, told them things I wish I hadn't told them, and things like that. And then you just never speak to them again, and that's quite a common experience, I think, that people have. And yeah, I think I noticed when I was a kid, I had 3 older brothers, so they often had different things going on with their friends. My oldest brother, he had like 2 of my brothers had quite a lot of friends, like a normal amount of friends, quite social. One of them had quite a lot of trouble with it. And I think I noticed in the 2 brothers that had a decent amount of friends was that I guess I found from a young age, I found kind of odd, because I was a sort of oddly philosophical child, which is maybe why I had trouble maintaining friendships, or maybe because I say things like that about myself. But I was, and I used to think a lot about. I used to sort of think, question things a lot. I think like, why are they doing that, or why is that? I would think things through to their sort of logical or philosophical conclusions a lot, and I always thought like there would be certain friends they would have, and they'd think like, I don't want to see this person because I don't enjoy being around him. And I always thought like, it can't really be as simple as that, can it? Like a friendship, it can't. What does that mean then? It's not. What is it? What's the structural integrity of a friendship? The same as if you think about a relationship, a romantic relationship. If you're with your partner, I don't think it's right that you just, the minute it's boring to you, you go, right, I want a new one. That's not really how it works. I know that there's some expectation of mutual benefit and enjoyment, but there's meant to also be some level of commitment, and there's something a bit more in it than just how do I feel right now, and do I enjoy this person's company, currently in my life. There's something a bit more than that, and some component of like loyalty, I think. And so yeah, whilst that was entirely up to them, I always thought like it was a bit odd that there'd be certain people they just didn't want to be friends with at that time or anymore, simply because they just didn't like being around that person at that time, or that person didn't do this thing or that thing or whatever it was, or that person would ring and they would like they'd be like, oh, don't, if it's so and so, back when you had a landline, obviously they'd say like, oh, answer it, and if it's this person, tell them I'm not here. That was a very common thing back then, to like tell people that someone wasn't there, you know. And maybe I never did that because I didn't have enough friends to do that. So if anyone rang and wanted to hang out with me, I was like, cool. Like, I didn't really often turn people down. But yeah, they often did. And I always felt like there must be, it can't just be a thing. Otherwise, it's not what's the personal component of it, I guess. It might as well be a movie or a game. Like, you're treating the person like they're a computer game, you know, or a movie. Like, oh, I don't like this, turn it off. What is keeping it together then? Just like the pleasure of being around each other. Is that the only thing? Because you get that from these transient friendships. You know, if you move somewhere and you meet someone who has a similar hobby to you and they're relatively funny and you have a couple of beers or whatever, you do this thing and you laugh and stuff. Nothing wrong with that, but that is basically, that's a movie. That's just a movie. You're just enjoying that person kind of the same way you enjoy, like, it's two-dimensional, I think. Not entirely, but mostly. So what is the purpose of it? Like, would that mean then if that person got cancer, you'd be like, fuck this is boring. I don't want to sit here in hospital, this is shit, you know. Whereas that's not really the case, right? The expectation is kind of, it's same with a relationship. You kind of think, well, something terrible could happen to me, something terrible could happen to you. I'd like to think, you know, you would be there for me and I might be there for you. Something might, it's almost some kind of, it's a kind of mutual, I don't know, there's a kind of unspoken agreement in that regard. So there is something more to it than just the surface level value of like, do you enjoy that person or not? But it did seem to me at the time like it was seen a lot as just kind of take and not give. And so that's why I say I don't think this is a recent problem. I think this trend began quite a while ago. And I think the trend really, I think, began when we stopped needing each other. We stopped literally depending on each other for things. Like, you don't really need anyone. It's the same way even with relationships, right? Like, women don't really need men to, like, protect them anymore. They have the police and the state, and the fact that whilst it's getting worse in some big cities and stuff, generally things are quite safe now. Generally things are easy to do. And similarly, like, men don't need the certain things men don't need women for anymore. And we just don't need each other as much. More things are done for us, more things are provided by technology, more things are done by the state, and we're less dependent on each other and dependent on our communities, and we're more likely to move. You're often, you know, not going to know who your neighbours are even. You might never even really see them, and most people probably are not on speaking terms with their neighbours. They probably don't even know their names, and you don't feel like you need to. Whereas in the past, you needed to know who the other people were around you, and you depended on each other for various things, and communities were more important. In some places they still are, but generally, like, communities were more important in the past. And men, I think, needed to collaborate a lot, like for hunting, for fighting, mostly for those two things, I guess, and for, you know, protecting their small communities and tribes and stuff. So friendships weren't about just taking and not giving and saying, can I enjoy this person for a bit and then get bored of them. They were, you know, you were kind of locked in. Like, these are your friends. These are the other young men your age who live in this village that you're from. And you have to know each other. You have to be friends. You have to form alliances or you'll die, basically. So I think it's in us. It's in our evolution. And I don't think as much about female evolution, but I'm sure there are a lot of similar reasons why women naturally form friendships. Although I do think the more kind of life and death essential nature of it does make friendship possibly more of an integral thing, almost like biologically for men. But I don't know, I haven't given it a great deal of thought, to be honest, because I thought of it more in relation to myself and my gender than I have about women. But friendship seems to be a fairly important thing for women, but maybe not as much. I don't know. I really don't know. It depends on the individual, of course. And nowadays, that's all changed, and our biology is less relevant. But yeah, I started to think about this recently because there's certain friends I've had throughout my life, and I had this weird thing. I've had this weird thing going on for a while, for a few years. There's some people I don't speak to anymore, and I have dreams about them a lot, like very often. And I found this very weird, like really honestly weird, because in my daily life, I don't really think about these people at all. I know, it's really not like a thing that I feel I have particularly strong feelings about or anything. Like, yeah, just not at all. And I just have dreams about these people, and I still do, like, have dreams about these people all the time. And every time I'd wake up, I'd be like, what was that about, man? Like, why do I always have dreams about these people? And I came up with all sorts of explanations for it, like why I did. Because, when you look into this, the science of dreams, most of it is bollocks. Like, not the science of them, but the study of them. The science of them as a sort of, as a physiological phenomenon or whatever is perfectly valid. But I think a lot of the sort of dream psychology and stuff is absolute bollocks. But a lot of that would say, for example, if you've done something wrong, you wronged someone, you've harmed someone in some way, then it's a way of, in dreams, you might like apologize to them, or it's a way of, you have some guilt, or sorry, I'm really slow today. I'm just, I don't know, my brain is just a bit fried. But the dreaming about them is a way of, making amends or showing you're sorry for something or whatever it is. Or you have some kind of unresolved feelings. And I would try and entertain that. And then I would sort of think, like, I guess I do, but I don't particularly care. And I don't feel that, I don't really feel that. And then I started to think maybe it's about like drugs. Maybe it's because I was often doing drugs, and I was kind of in like in something akin to the dream world. So it's almost like whatever, and I was coming up with all these explanations for it. And then the other day I realized, like, no, it's just like a biological need, basically, like to have friends. And I quite enjoy or at least, on the surface, I quite enjoy not really having many friends, and I don't have any social obligations for sure. Like, I know people, but there's zero social obligation. And I do think that's one of the things that people are trying to avoid. Often, obviously, people don't choose to have no friends, they just have no friends. But one of the things I think that a lot of us avoid is the social obligation. Like, oh, this person is annoying and I have to see them, or this person is difficult and I have to see them regularly and I don't want to, so it becomes easier to just withdraw completely. And it is another one of those obligations that maybe it's better than what it leaves in its absence. Maybe that sometimes tedious obligation where there is a bit of give and it's not all take, like maybe that's better than what you're left with if you withdraw from that. But yeah, I have no social obligations now, which is really, well, it feels very convenient, at least, I guess. I won't say it's good, but that is how I feel. But I know that maybe, really it's not good. So I feel, yeah, like on the surface good about it. But at the same time, yeah, it's like a biological need. And I think that that's what all these dreams are, right? Because if you don't have sex, for example, you start to dream about it. If you don't come, like, you start dreaming about it. You start having dreams about sex because your body, or just you, like, you really want sex. And even if it's not convenient on a day-to-day basis to think about the fact that you want sex, so you avoid thinking about it and you get on with your work and you do other things. When you go to sleep, it's not even just your body, but you are like, I want sex. So you start dreaming about it. And I would imagine similar things probably happen with food. In fact, I think I've heard people talk about this when, these like Lad Bible podcast videos and stuff where they talk. It's very strange that it's called Lad Bible. Lad Bible has gone in a very unexpected direction. It used to be like lad memes, and now they have some of the best interviews on the internet. If you haven't seen the one about the guy who was shipwrecked with his family and they ate turtles and stuff, it's really good. They drank turtle blood, I think. That is really good. They've got a lot of good stuff on there. But yeah, I'm sure I've heard someone talk about that, being starving and dreaming about food when they're in and out of consciousness and stuff. So I think that friendship is, it's maybe not as obvious in some ways of a need as sex, because you're horny, you get like a boner or whatever, or, if you're a woman, whatever, you get the equivalent of a boner. But you just, it's very obvious, but friendship is like a bit more, that need for that thing is kind of like, there's not like it's not like, oh, my hands get really swollen or something when I want friends. Like, it's not like, oh, my head stings, it's not as obvious. And we're not in tune, I think, with ourselves most of the time because we have busy lives and weird, unnatural jobs where we're doing weird, unnatural things and living weird, unnatural lifestyles. So we're not as in tune with what we really want, like deep down, or what we need. And I see it in my dog. Dogs are like us. They're very social animals. And she gets everything that she should really want from us. We play with her all the time. We walk her all the time. We talk to her all the time. We feed her. And she loves us so much, like she's obsessed with us. But when she sees other dogs, there's something different. She sees other dogs and she wants to be with them. And she doesn't even have a very good time with other dogs. She's not very good at socializing. And dogs often get annoyed with her or ignore her or don't want to play with her because she doesn't understand social cues very well. And sometimes dogs have been aggressive with her or she's been a bit aggressive with them and been told off. But she still always wants to be around dogs. And wants to, she understands, like, I'm a dog, they're dogs, we're supposed to be together, dogs are supposed to be together, because they're more in tune with themselves and their base kind of like biological needs than we are. We've subverted most of ours. And yeah, so I think that even though, I have some of these transient friendships, or maybe not transient, but for now, I think my brain at a certain point, particularly when I was like coming of age, was like, right, this is my like kind of tribe of people, and those are my friends, and that it kind of like locked on in that way. I think because if you, again, going back to being a man, like if you're a man, you imagine being in a tribe, like, thousands of years ago, you would when you went from being a kid to being an adult, there'd be a certain group of other men you were around who all went through that process more or less at the same time, and you all began doing the same things at the same time. And that is like as old as humanity itself. Like that is something that is a million times more a part of who we are than what we're currently doing, than the weird stuff that we're currently doing. Like doing things together, collaborating, that's how we survived. That's why we exist. That's why we're a dominant species. It's not because we're powerful on our own. We're not really that powerful on our own. The only reason we even can have the illusion of being powerful on our own now is because of all the years of collaboration that's come before us. So it's an inexorable part of who we are. And we can tell ourselves that we don't want it or need it, but that's not really true. And so, yeah, that's what I realised the other day, is why I keep having these dreams. And yet I imagine the idea of having a group of friends, and I think like, oh, it sounds rough. Like it sounds like a huge amount of work and obligation and pressure. And people probably think the same about relationships as well. Like a lot of the time it's probably easier to go, oh man, I'd have to date. Then if I did find a girlfriend, I'd have to do this. I'd have to like get dressed. I'd have to like speak to her. I'd have to do things I don't want to do. I'd have to go to places I don't like. I'd have to talk about my feelings. I'd have to do this and that. I could just like bung on some hentai, get my sex doll, and just, you know, go to town. Never watched hentai in my life, by the way. That's that's me just broadly and crassly stereotyping about what the kind of person who's you know, particularly avoidant of relationships and a social life might do. Just not my bag. Cartoons, like, not even slightly. Never had that inkling even. I guess because I don't watch anime. So I was, you know, I think if you watch anime, you start to get horny for cartoons, basically. If I'd probably grown up watching a lot of anime, I probably would have been horny for cartoons, but yeah, don't watch anime. And really, you know, struggle to not judge people who do, but I know that's wrong. Nothing wrong with watching anime, I understand. Please don't feel attacked if you watch anime and you're watching this. I just, yeah, don't know, can't help it. Yeah, so yeah, a lot of people, they're like, oh no, some of it's really good. Some of it's like, yeah, but those aren't the ones you're watching, you know? You're watching like baby ones. You're watching like Naruto and One Piece or whatever it is. I've seen bits of them. Those are for babies. Anyway, you're not sitting around watching Akira or whatever it is 24/7, are you? You know, when you watch 7 hours of anime a day, most of what you're watching is for babies, basically. It's children's cartoons. Oddly sexual children's cartoons made by perverts, Japanese perverts. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I'm joking. I'm sure there's some. I know there's a lot of good anime. Anyway, moving on from anime. Yeah. So it's a thing that, yeah, whether you know, that example I gave of a person who says like, yeah, a relationship is inconvenient, I have to do this, that, and the other. And when you see that from the outside, normally you think, yeah, but you're missing the point, really. It's worth it. Generally, depends who you're in a relationship with. The same with a pet. I used to always think, I don't want a dog. Like, I have to feed it, I have to walk it, I've already got enough problems of my own, so much responsibility. Got one to look after for a week, was paid to look after her. That's my dog now, who I adopted in the end. And as soon as she was in my house and I was walking with her and I was playing with her and hanging out with her, I was like, man, I'll do anything to keep this dog. Like, I will do anything to keep this dog. I love it so much. And I never would have considered, like, no one could have talked me into getting a dog before that. As much as I loved them, I was like, nah, not worth it. And it's so much work, but it's so worth it. And I think people often think the same way, feel the same way about friendships and relationships and stuff like that. So I think that's part of the problem. And I think it's like, it's almost on the level of like sunlight or something. You know, if you don't go out in the sun, you don't feel that immediately. Like, yeah, it's nice when you're out in the sun, right? Like, it's, you know, sometimes it's nice and it feels good, but it's not like, oh, this is fucking incredible, I'm absorbing these rays, and, you know, you don't feel it. It's not like food. You feel it as soon as you eat food. When you're hungry, you eat something like tasty and nourishing, you immediately think like, oh yeah, that's correct, that's what I should be doing. Or water, when you're really thirsty, you have a glass of water. Or you need a piss, you go for a piss and it feels really good. It's not really like that with sunlight. But if you don't get sunlight, you get extremely depressed and you can die if you don't get any sunlight. You know, you get all sorts of crazy diseases and stuff. And you could say friendship is different in the sense that you don't die if you don't have friends. But then it depends how you look at it. It depends on how you look at like the mind and body. And if you don't have any social contact, you're likely to become very depressed. And if you become very depressed, you might kill yourself. So it's not, again, I mean, there's an element of obviously of like, you know, or at least a debate about free will there. But yeah, you know, still, it clearly can have very serious consequences. And even if you feel like you're getting all of those things in other ways, I think I realised it from being around nature as well. like, I enjoy being around nature. I enjoy looking at things, and I enjoy, looking at like mountains and stuff and being near the sea. But I've realised there's a lot more going on than just what I'm perceiving when I'm out in nature. There's a lot more going on than my enjoyment of it, because sometimes it's boring. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, the fucking ocean, it's beautiful, whatever. But something is happening inside me subconsciously. It's not just my conscious experiencing of the event that matters. There's more to it than that. And I'm having a chemical reaction to it that I can't perceive. Maybe I could perceive it if I was more in tune with myself, but it's happening anyway, whether or not I am. And yeah, I think real socializing, like the kind of socializing and forming of groups and collaborating and things like that is innate to us, I think has a similar effect. I think it like ticks some boxes in your brain and body that like you can't really do in another way. You can't really, it's just something that you kind of, I wouldn't say need, because look how many of us are living without it and are okay, but people are not that happy. You could liken it a bit to the internet, right? Like, if I don't go on my phone, I'll sit there on the sofa and I'll be like, this is so boring, I should just go on my phone. I'm so fucking bored. Nothing's happening. I feel so bored. So I go on my phone. And in the short term, I think this is better. I'm on my phone, I'm looking at Reddit, I'm looking at a funny video or something, and I'm not amused, but I'm not utterly bored. I'm just a bit bored. And in the short term, on the surface, you can look at that and say, that's better. Why wouldn't I just do this? Seems better. But when you look at us as a whole and you zoom out, we're very depressed generally, and anxious and unhappy and can't focus, and seem to all be having mental health problems or struggling in one way or another in ways that people were not before. And there are other factors, obviously economic factors, I think, are quite a big one. But that doesn't explain it all, because there's a lot of people who have a lot less than us in the Western world who are a lot happier. And there have been a lot of people historically who've had a lot less and been happier. So, yeah, those things are a factor. And I think they're made worse by constantly consuming images of things that you want. Being so aware, because again, going back, to the past, to my sort of vague, cobbled together interpretation of what things were like when people lived in tribes, you just lived around people who had the same shit as you most of the time. Like, I think, if you weren't like, ooh, 4-bedroom house. you had your shitty mud hut, and then your neighbours had their shitty mud hut, and everyone had a shitty mud hut, and you weren't aware, and you didn't have, and there wasn't this odd awareness of like other people and other things. So I think that doesn't help. But generally, yeah, I think it's the lifestyle. I think it's living lifestyles of convenience and comfort and mild stimulation to stave off boredom. I think that stuff is making people very unhappy, and I think one big component of that is not having friends. Yeah, I feel like family is the last kind of bastion, people aren't even having relationships anymore. So family is kind of like the last bastion, of like things that kind of keep us together, and integral aspects of just global human culture that are kind of agreed upon by everybody. Everything else feels like it's being ruined, and stripped away systematically, maybe on purpose, maybe not. I guess that's more conspiratorial than I should get into on here. But it does feel like these things, whether it's by design, I think sometimes by design and sometimes it's just a natural progression that happens to be fairly beneficial for certain people, certain key actors in society. And that's just how things are going. I think it can change. I do think one thing that will happen, this is only tangentially related to what I've been talking about in this video, but one thing that will happen, I think, is all the people who are not hugely social, who don't, or at least who prioritize convenience, who prioritize travel, who prioritize hobbies and things like that, won't have families and will kind of just die out. And then there'll be a smaller pool of people left. But those people who are left are naturally more kind of collaborative, social, family-oriented, and maybe sort of friend-oriented. So I think we're seeing a kind of contracting and expanding and ebbs and flows and all of this, and cycles and pendulums and whatever you want to call it. I think we're seeing things like that happening, processes like that happening. I don't think everything is constantly heading in one direction. I don't think it's all linear. But for now, that's kind of what's happening, and maybe it will be as well. I mean, maybe from that pool of people who have families and try to be social and form communities, their kids will end up being, on average, just like our generation or worse. So there might be no stopping it. But yeah, it's worth considering, that maybe being around people face to face and socializing and collaborating and forging meaningful relationships, maybe it's not just friends, maybe just family and relationships, and maybe just the act of actually being around people face to face physically just does something for us that's hard to explain. Don't say that to people. Don't text an old friend and be like, I'm really missing the physical aspect. There's something physically that you do for me that I just I can't get anywhere else. I've tried to find it on the internet. I just need that physical. I need something physical from you. I need the physical aspect of our relationship. I've searched far and wide, and nothing can replicate that. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. That's how I feel about it. And still I can't be bothered, honestly. Like, I feel like I have other priorities, but obviously my kind of subconscious mind disagrees. It's like, come on, man, where's like my pack? Like, what's going on? We've got like missions to do together. That is another thing as well. I see, when I see kids hanging out now, I see boys hanging out, and I feel like when you're like you have friends when you're really young, but when you're like 8, what do you really know about anything, But when you're a bit older, I think when you're a teenager, like as a teenage boy, I think that is when it's a really key time, because you're going from being a kid to being a man. So you're going from sort of not really mattering, to be fair, to being a person. So friendships then are like very crucial. And I was lucky. I had really good ones. And I, particularly in hindsight, I see that now, to be honest. Like, but they, I see kids that age, like boys that age now, and they're just sitting around and they're on their phone. And I know obviously everyone talks about this, and I know it's like, the most cliched thing to bring up on YouTube, but it is crazy, and it is sad, because you used to have to find shit to do, and that was a form of mission. That was like hunting. It was like, what are we going to do, I guess for people before my generation, for people older than me, a lot of the time it was like, let's go out and like fight and stuff. But my generation were pussies. Like, we didn't get in fights. If we did, it was like scary. But like, we'd have to find shit to do. Try and like, let's gather some money together and like buy some weed, or let's like, even before then, it was like, buy some sweets, or let's go to so-and-so's house. He has a football because we don't have a ball. Let's go and find him. I think I remember where he lives. We'll get his ball. We'll go to the park. We'll play. Then we'll go back to your place for dinner. And then so-and-so's going to come round and he's going to bring his like N64 controller or whatever. And there were some technological aspects, coming into it. But like, still, it was like collaborative and social. And that collaboration wasn't like, look at this TikTok thought. They wouldn't even do this. They wouldn't even show it to each other like this. They'd be like, I've sent it to you. I've just forwarded you the link on WhatsApp. You can look. And then the other kids just sat there on the bench, just looking at the same TikTok thought. Yeah, no, it's fucked up, man. Every time I see like boys that age hanging out, every fucking time they're on their phone. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all. Yeah. Can't think of anything else on this topic. But yeah. Well, as I said at the beginning, it is a strangely, sorry to keep continuing the video when I'm wrapping it up, but it is a strangely taboo topic, I think. And it's one for a while I didn't want to make a video about, because I feel it's just a weird taboo topic. For example, you don't hear about it much in music, right? Like, you hear about relationships a lot. You know, you broke my heart, you cheated on me, I can't stop thinking about you. Imagine you made a song like that about a friend, you know, I can't stop thinking about you. You'd feel really embarrassed. And it is an oddly taboo topic. It's an oddly I think it's a shameful topic. And as I said, I think it's becoming less so, but I do feel it's quite a shameful topic for people. I feel we've gotten to a point where people don't have that much shame about relationships, and someone could just be like, oh, I miss her. And like, you'd think like, oh man, pull yourself together. This is pathetic. But it's kind of socially acceptable. But if someone was behaving like that over a friendship, obviously it would be more inappropriate if they were. But still, like, yeah, you would think this is insane, this is a crazy person, and they wouldn't do it. And people don't like to admit it. People are happier to admit, I think, they've been hurt by like a romantic partner. It's more normal to admit that. People don't really like to do it with friendships. Although it does remind me of not even a guy I know. There's a guy that my friend knows who we like stalk on Facebook. I've never met this person in my life. I've never even lived near him, but my friend showed me his page, and we sort of like stalk his page on Facebook. And he's obsessed with all his like friends, and is very clingy and needy with them. And he's recently going through like a kind of friend breakup, and he is literally using the kind of he's using the kind of phrases you use when you go for a breakup, and he's handling it like a romantic breakup, and making like cryptic posts, and often very kind of like not so cryptic posts about this person, and posting images of like, you broke my heart, you lied to me, and it's all over a friend, and it's really fucking odd. Like, it seems so weird to behave like that with a friend, and it should be. I mean, it should generally. But there's not as much of like a template, I think, for dealing with things like that. And in general, yeah, I do think it's a taboo thing, like that people are more embarrassed to talk about. Anyway, all right, chaps. Yeah, particularly interested to know people's situations, thoughts and feelings regarding this. I'm sure there's a few of you watching this who don't really live in this new kind of world, you know, where people don't really have friends. There are a lot of people I've met who this doesn't really apply to, and who just have quite normal social lives that could have existed 30 years ago. I was speaking to one guy a while ago, actually, and he said he had like 11 or 12 really close friends. And I was like, that is fucking weird. And he said, yeah, I know that's weird. Like, I know that most people don't. And he said that most of his friends don't have that many friends, but he just said, yeah, it's just, for me, it's just completely normal. And that definitely still exists for a lot of people, in lots of little pockets of the world where everything feels almost the same as it always did. But the change overall, when you zoom out, is obvious. Anyway, all right, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you're all doing well. And yeah, if you are in this situation, described by the statistics, if you are one of those people who has 0 close friends, know that you're less alone in that than you would have been in other times throughout history. So yeah, cool. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Take care. It's not the most reassuring thing, is it? You're less alone in that than you would have been at other times throughout history. That's not the best bedside manner. It's like you go to the doctor and you're dying of cancer, and he's like, this is less serious than it might have been 100 years ago. So don't worry. Like, right, I'm still shitting myself. So can you tell me something more, please? But no, I can't. Hopefully the doctor can, but I can't. So yeah, cheers guys. Thanks for watching. Bye.